Welcome to another edition of Wealth Without Borders podcast. And today we're going to be focusing on a longer, more organic form because I've got someone really fascinating with me today, and that is Ian Mote. Ian, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you for having me on.
That's my pleasure. And whereabouts are you in the world, and what is the weather like?
I'm in Shanghai, China, and it's been nice spring, warm weather all week until today where it's raining.
Oh, okay. Well, yes, I said, I'm in the same city, so I know about that. So yeah, a bit unreliable, the weather at the moment. And then for those of you who don't know Ian actually is a personal friend, and he's also been an expat for close to, I think, 20 years now. And he spent time in Hong Kong, in Dubai, and here in Shanghai. And Ian has had a career in banking that's taken him all over the region, including every province in China, which is remarkable. And in fact, this led to a book that Ian wrote with a wonderful title of From Chicken Feet to Crystal Baths, which we'll no doubt talk about in this podcast. And the title of the podcast is Embracing the Differences. So a very warm welcome to the podcast, Ian.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
So 20 years ago then, roughly, why did you become an expat in the first place?
I mean, I think a lot of it comes down to curiosity and always looking to try new experiences. Probably the seeds go back even further. When I was at school, I took a year off after finishing my A-levels before going to university. And I went on a school exchange and I lived in America for 6 months. But part of the reason behind it was not to live in a big city, but to live in a small town. So having grown up in London, I went and lived in a small town of 2,000 people in Kansas for 6 months and went to high school in America. Maybe because I'd grown up watching American TV and American films. And I wanted to experience part of that culture. So that was a big thing for me. And then after university, I joined a bank in London and worked there for about 5 or 6 years. But the bank I worked for, Standard Chartered, was very big in Asia and not so big in London. And after a few years, it was clear that there wasn't a lot of potential in London and I needed to move to keep my career going. But also they had all these offices all over the world in far more exotic places. And I'd done a couple of business trips out to Singapore and Hong Kong. And I visited Hong Kong as a child as well and really enjoyed it. So I pushed for a move. And it took a long time. It took about a year of going around in circles, talking to everybody I could possibly find, using all my contacts before I finally got the opportunity. And then, yes, just shy of 20 years ago, I moved to Hong Kong and never really looked back after that.
Fantastic. And Hong Kong, obviously a very vibrant city. And then if we sort of fast forward 20 years, we'll touch on some of those early experiences a bit later, maybe. What do you feel is special about the region you're currently living and working in?
I mean, it really means something to me. I've obviously spent a lot of time with a lot of expats all over the years, and different people have different experiences that they tie into. It's more a question of what sort of feels a home or a culture that you really identify with. And I first came to China in 1995, and I then spent time in Hong Kong, and I always loved going and looked for the opportunity to go back. I love going to Japan as well. The whole of this region really appeals to me. I like the food, like the people. But in the same way, I know a lot of people who lived in Singapore for 20 years because they love Southeast Asia and they love going to Thailand and Bali. I know people who lived in Africa for many, many years. I think not so much to try and sell this region, but just the fact that I think if you get to travel and you can find all these different experiences and see all these different places, some of them are going to really appeal to you and sing to you and say, yes, this is something I want to experience more of. You know, me at the heart, I'm a city guy. So living in Hong Kong, the craziness and the hustle and bustle of Hong Kong for 4 years was fantastic. And Shanghai is that same feel, the drive and the energy. And, I was lucky. I moved here just the end of 2008, just after the financial crisis. A lot of places around the world were struggling. In fact, even Dubai that I just left was really struggling. But China then, that was when it really came to the forefront in terms of world economics. And Shanghai was really a center coming forwards for the first time. So it really felt like you were somewhere at the center of where the future was going to be. And that's a great feeling to have. So, the opportunity to tap into that and spend some time here was something that was really appealing.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that in terms of the energy of the city and being at the center of a driving force of entrepreneurship, etc. And then, I mean, you've traveled all around, as we said, every single province of China. So you've got a great knowledge of it. And then, how did that lead to your book?
Well, I mean, it started that the job I was doing, both in Hong Kong and then when I came here, I used to cover a lot of companies in natural resources and commodities. So I would have to go and visit aluminium smelters and iron ore mines and steel mills. And obviously they're not in Shanghai or Beijing, they're all over the country. So I got to go to Shanxi and go to Xi'an and then drive 5 hours up country to this small town because they had a big aluminium smelter there. Or go down to, in Hunan, there's a lot of food production. So I went to visit a lot of companies there. There's a lot of sugar in Guangxi, places like that. So for a long time, I was doing a lot of traveling for work and going and seeing all these places. And then the more I did it, the more I realized just the huge variety there was in China. And so then I tried to start exploring more. While I was here, I thought I'd take this opportunity to see what I can. So, the first year I was here, I went on holiday to Tibet and drove up to Everest. How often would you ever get the opportunity to do something like that? And then the more you explore and you see all these places, there's other things you do, like I went to the beach in Hainan and went scuba diving, or I went north to Beijing and went skiing, all in the same country, all 2 hours from where I was living. And then it got to a point, I realized there was 31 provinces in China, and I'd done, 22, 23 without really trying. And it came to me one day, hey, I could do this. There's a possibility here to complete the set. And it had been a lifetime ambition to write a book. I used to write travel stories and tell people what I've been up to and tell them some of the stories I'd experienced. So I thought that's the hook then to put the book together. And I just started writing down all my stories, and I wasn't sure initially I'd have enough or be long enough. And then I wrote down, and the first 3 chapters were like a quarter of the book already. I was like, okay, I'm going to be okay with this. So then I tried to target the rest. And when you see these places, you go to places like Gansu or Shanghai, maybe not places you'd obviously go to, but each province of China is so big. When you deliberately target to go there, you find there's lots of stuff you can do. So you go to Gansu, you do the Silk Road. It's amazing history there. You go to Shanghai, they've got a huge lake, massive mountains. That's what they call it, the Switzerland of China. So you can go and experience all these places that probably I never would have heard of if I hadn't made the effort to look. But once it was there, it's some fantastic experiences that came out of it.
Great. And then sort of going a little bit looking backwards, as it were, how do you cope with being so far away from family, friends, places, and loved ones?
Yeah, it's not easy, and it's there was a certain period of adjustment to it when I first moved to Hong Kong. I think it was an interesting comparison through the way my move came around. My parents were actually away when I first left the UK, but they managed to come through Hong Kong after I was only there 2 weeks. So they saw me in Hong Kong when I first moved there, but because I'd just gone, I hadn't really adjusted to it. I didn't really know so much to do. So they sort of could see what I was trying to achieve, but weren't really maybe convinced by it. Then they came back 2 years later when I was much more settled. I had friends and we did lots of trips and I took them to places. And in Hong Kong, you can hire a big junk boat, which are the boats that sail out into the sea. And we went to an island off the coast of Hong Kong for a barbecue. And we're sitting there at about 11 o'clock in the morning, the sun's beating, it's 30 degrees out, we're all sunbathing on the deck, going out for barbecue lunch. My mum just turns to me, she goes, well, I can see why you don't want to come home then. And then they once they could see that I was settled and how much I was getting out of it, I think they were much more sold on the idea. And then it became a thing of, can they come and see me in interesting places? So when I lived in Dubai, they used to come out pretty regularly because the sun was shining in February when it was grim in the UK. So they'd come and see me. I always say we don't see each other as much as we used to, but we do better things. So they'd come and see me in Dubai, or we met in Thailand 1 year and had Christmas in Bangkok. We went on holidays to Vietnam together. So
right,
it takes a bit more planning and a bit more organization, but you can't just nip round on a Sunday morning, but you can do better things, and maybe you have more memorable occasions when you do see each other. And now obviously the technology has developed so much over the years. So, video calling started as a thing just after I'd left home, and we did a little bit, but now, with FaceTime, it does concern me. I have a young daughter, and obviously I want her relationship with her grandparents to be as strong as possible. And with the travel issues over the last year or so, normally we'd go home once a year, and obviously we haven't been home for a while now, so they're missing some of her growing up, which is a shame. But we FaceTime every week, and they see her, and they build a relationship across the video calls, which is not ideal, but it's a lot easier. Compared to when I lived in Kansas, I used to write letters home, and it'd take 10 days or 2 weeks to get home, and we spoke on the phone maybe a couple of times in 6 months. And now with a quick video call, you can do it, or you can take a video and send it and see it in 30 seconds. So that makes it a lot easier, I think. So you adapt and find different ways to do it.
Yeah. And then you must have seen a lot of expats coming and going over that 20-year period. What would you say are the qualities that best define an expat who is successful in what they do?
I mean, I think the adaptability and the willingness to embrace the culture and the opportunity helps then to find the opportunities. I noticed personally a big contrast between Hong Kong and China, in that Hong Kong, because it's so westernized and it's sort of the British influence from before, a lot of it, it's almost a good first step as an expat, and that it's actually not that difficult. But then people come in and they don't maybe have the need then to fully embrace another culture, because they don't need to. Whereas you come to China, you've got to be full in. You've really got to go for it. You need to learn a little bit of the language. You've got to eat local food. You've got to participate in daily life 100%. And the more you do that, the more you get out of it. And then if you really understand the culture and you really understand what people are doing here, that's where opportunities come. And, if you're an expat, you're going to be managing a team probably. So you need to understand how people react and how to motivate and to manage a team. When I was here in the bank, I had a team of 34 at one point. I think I was the only Westerner, a couple from Singapore, a couple from Hong Kong, and then 30 people from China. So if I didn't learn more about being a manager of a local team and how people react and what their expectations are, I could never have made that work. So I think that's it. But then what you'll find is the people who've been here a long time are here because they love it, because they've got involved and they've found a lot to the culture they can embrace. And, let's be honest, a lot of people, myself included, married Chinese ladies, have a family here. My daughter speaks as much Chinese as she does English and is fully immersed in a local way of life. And, that's a big thing that I want to embrace and want to continue.
Yeah. And then you've mentioned, being able to learn from experiences and being adaptable. What would you say is the biggest thing that you've learned from being here over the last 20 years?
I mean, I just think it's that, I think it's that self-awareness that so much stuff is going to be different than you expect it to, then you have to take a step back off. I know you used to do this a lot early on. It's like I went to a meeting and I said certain thing that didn't work. So I need not to do that again. Or I tried this and it did work. Let's remember that. You have to, if you come saying, well, I've done this before and this is what's got me here, so it should work again, that's not the case. It's almost a fresh start. So I'm trying stuff out all the time, different acts of behavior or ways of management or ways of selling to clients. And they're very critical afterwards, constructively critical, and saying, well, this could work, this might not work. And then also what we found here is China, and I didn't really notice until I moved here, it changes so fast. You always think this is such a huge country, a big like ocean liner with a slow turning circle, but it's not. It spins on a pivot. So you have to have that adaptability and that change. And again, what's worked for you in the past and got you to this level might not be relevant anymore. And again, particularly when I came in 2008, I found that the market changed a lot after the financial crisis, and the local market is very adaptable and will respond to opportunity. So you have to be willing to try that and try something different, not just rely on what's worked in the past.
Yeah. I know quite a number of expats who say you don't come here to reinvent yourself so much as to invent yourself. So it is such a different culture. I think many people find it a huge learning experience, which may be one of the reasons why we're here. What do you, now this is a bit of a tough question maybe because you've got so many memories accumulated over those 20 years, but what would you say was one of your most meaningful memories that you have?
Well, as I said, my wife is from China, so I regularly go down to her hometown. which I've never seen another Westerner in our hometown before. It's a decent sized city, but it's not necessarily on the tourist trail. So I've never seen a Westerner before. So just the fact that I am welcomed and part of her family in this medium-sized city in southwest China, which, you know, I would never even have heard of until I came here, until I met her. You know, I think I'd take that away. It's just that, you know, they've been very good to me and they've welcomed me into their family. But just the fact that I've managed to do that, build a relationship with them, and I go and see them and talk to people, and they're people they look forward to seeing me, and we interact whenever I go down there. Even they don't speak any English. My Chinese is sometimes better than others, but just enough to keep that relationship going. I think that, to be honest, you know, that's it. If you'd said when I was a kid that I would something I'd end up doing one day, I wouldn't have believed you. But it just goes to prove, you know, people at the end of the day are all very similar, and we want similar things from our family and our life. And I've had the chance to do that with them. Okay, yeah. And prove to other people maybe that that's not as hard as it looks.
And then, what's your funniest memory, Ian?
I mean, it's a bit of a long story, but when I first was in Hong Kong, my first business trip, I went to Inner Mongolia. I mean, I didn't even know where Inner Mongolia was at that point. I got it confused with the country. So Mongolia, the country, is north of China, but Inner Mongolia is the northmost province. This is in 2002, so pretty long time ago. Going to visit an aluminium smelter way out of town in this northern province in China. I went up there and I got taken along. I didn't really know a lot about aluminium at that time. It was my first visit. I didn't speak any Chinese. I was partnering a couple of colleagues from my Hong Kong office. And I just went to basically to experience it and see what was going on and try and learn something about what was happening. What I wasn't expecting was that it was my first initiation into the culture of eating and drinking together in China. And so we had this big meeting in the morning, which I sort of sat in the corner and someone translated a few things for me here and there, and I was on the outskirts, didn't really say a lot. But then when we sat for lunch, there's maybe 12 of us around this one big table, lots of food, great food, really enjoyed that. And then they put down this little small cup about this big in front of me and put a clear liquid in it. And no one told me what it was, but then the chairman of the company's toasted me and I have to drink this. And it tastes like absolute rocket fuel. It burns back my throat. I'm looking around, I can't believe I had to drink this. And it's Chinese rice wine called Baizhou, but this is Golden Camel specialty Mongolian brand. And I think, well, I've done one, okay, that's maybe been polite, but then they fill it up again. And I realized that one of the reasons my colleague has brought me on this trip is that because they know there's going to be a lot of drinking in this lunch, and that's what they want me to do. So I'm not there to talk about aluminium. I'm not there to talk about the Chinese economy or to give any knowledge. I'm there for the drinking. So, okay. So we do another one and and it's still burning my throat and killing me, but I can probably get through this. And then my colleague says to me, "Oh, can we tell him?" I say, "Well, I don't think it's appropriate. I don't. Can we tell him? Can we tell him?" I said, "Okay, right." And she says in Chinese, "Jinshan shi ta de shengre," which means today is his birthday. Oh, it's his birthday, right? More, bang, bang, bang. We're smashing all this at lunchtime. I'm all over the place after lunch, but we stop. We have more meetings in the afternoon, and then we have to go for dinner again in the evening. So and then they get more advice, more, and they bring out. They have an opera singer who comes and sings to us in the room in the restaurant. So she sings, and they bring out a big birthday cake, which is about this big. And I have to do more, and they make me stand up and do a toast in front of everybody. I have to put a headdress on, and she sings a song with me, and I have to sing back to her in Chinese. I have no idea what's going on here. Okay. And then my parents phone me because it's my birthday, and they're like, "Where are you?" I said, "I'm in a Mongolian restaurant with a headdress on doing Chinese rice wine." Like, oh, okay. That wasn't the answer that you were expecting. Well, so the whole evening goes on. Everyone at this point is drinking heavily. And then I try and talk to the opera singer a bit and ask her to teach me a phrase in Chinese. And she tells me this phrase in Chinese. Okay, right, I've got it. And so then we'd all leave the meeting, and the chairman of the company's been there, and we're trying to build a relationship with him, the convivial. And at the end of the night, he goes, "Oh, goodbye," and he goes to shake my hand. So I think, well, I'm in China now, so I give it a big sort of Confucian sign, which isn't particularly appropriate. but I'll do that anyway. And then I say my new Chinese phrase, which is "Wo ai ni," which basically translates to "I love you." And that was what the opera singer had told me. And he just looked at me very strangely and turned around and left. And that was the end of the dinner. So that was a birthday to remember.
Yes. Well, it could have ended much worse than that. So, yeah, I think you had a lucky escape there, Ian.
And yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it could. Well, yeah. Mongolia's got I've been back to there since. And yeah, it always involves heavy amounts of drinking. When I go there, it's you sort of go in knowing what you're expecting. But that was the first time, and maybe it's good that I went in cold, but I certainly wasn't cold when I left because the stuff burns you all the way through.
And then, if you had to sort of go back 20 years and do it all over again, what would you do differently?
I'd probably have bought a property in China as early as I could. I think I'd have done that. I mean, I think when I started going to China 2002, 2003, we saw the potential in terms of what was coming up, but I don't think anyone really foresaw the influence that it was going to take the way it has. So I think, much as I love my life in Hong Kong, I would have embraced China earlier and trying to get up here earlier. I think the quicker you got up here and the more you got your feet under the table, then the more benefit it would have bring. So yes, I think knowing how China is now influencing the world, I would have started my Mandarin lessons earlier and come up here more and try to embrace it even more than I did, I think.
Right. And then I happen to know that you're working on a new book, which I believe is called From Ice Castles to Ginger Socks. So you've mastered the art of the eccentric title there.
I think so. Yeah, I've got a certain theme going.
Yeah, which is great. And then when will we expect that book out, and how can people checking out the podcast get access to that book or those books?
Okay, so I'm aiming to publish it in the summer, so it's pretty much finished. It's doing the final few touches and then lining up to get the self-publishing to get it done in the summer. The first one was about the travel stories and going all around China and the experiences I had living here. And I just love the process of writing. I think maybe someone can identify with that. Yeah. So I've always had the urge then to repeat it, but then what experiences have I had that I can write about? I'm not very good at fiction. I have to write about what I've experienced and tell a story. Yeah, the biggest thing that's happened to me in the last 5 years is I became a parent. So I have a daughter here and brought her up here, but she's been brought up half Chinese and half English. And sometimes there's some quite big differences amongst those. There's different ways of, different parenting ideas. And again, these are cultural differences that I clearly hadn't experienced before, but now learning with my hands on here. So trying to tell the story of what it's like to be a parent here with one foot in each camp and the differences there. So that's what the second one's about. So slightly different to the first, but still with a cultural, one way cross-cultural eye open, I guess.
Great. And what we'll do is for anyone who's interested, we'll put a link to your book website in the podcast.
Yes, that would be great. Thank you. Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Ian. Excuse me. That's really fascinating. And I feel like we could go on and on with stories you've culled from every province in China, probably. But obviously, if people want to know more, they can check out your first book, right? That is still available, I presume.
Absolutely. It's on Amazon. Yep. So just search for that title. There's not many other titles like that. So if you look on Amazon, it'll be there.
Lovely. Okay, well, thank you so much for taking the time to share some of the wealth of your experiences with us.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Many thanks for checking out Wealth Without Borders podcast. I'd love you to head over to iTunes, subscribe, and leave us a review. And if you'd be kind enough to do that, I would really appreciate it. And then if you want to know more about what I do, check out wealthwithoutborders.net.